Welcome to section 3. In this section, I will go over task estimates. You will notice that I have the last project that we worked on, or the last file, called Upgrade Project S2.6 open. Soon we're going to be renaming that file. But first, I'm going to give you an overview of task estimates and this section. This section, again, is about creating task estimates. During the planning phase of a project, and in essence, you will be applying project time management, which is one of the Project Management Institute knowledge areas. After your project team helped create the work breakdown structure with summary tasks, detailed tasks, and milestones, the next step is to work with your project team again to create task estimates. They are not off the hook yet. Your schedule still needs more work, which will be covered in upcoming sections, such as creating dependencies, constraints, and resource assignments. But don't worry, you will get there. By default, Microsoft Project displays task durations using days in the duration column and using hours in the work column. The duration column displays the number of business or work days that tasks would take to complete. And business days typically fall on weekdays and are set up in project calendars, as you saw in previous sections. But by default, business days are set up from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., representing an 8-hour workday. So let me just take you there very quickly by going into File, Options. Then we're going to go into the Display tab to see the Gregorian Calendar or any calendar that you choose to select in here. Notice that I have Upgrade Project S2.6 open. When you go to the Schedule tab, there you will see the same Upgrade Project S2.6. Notice that the week starts on Sunday, fiscal year starts in January, and the default start time starts at 8 a.m. and the end period is 5 p.m. Hours per day is 8, hours per week is 40, and days per month is 20. Now let's talk about durations in general. Duration defines the start and finish date of tasks. These two columns in here. Regardless of work effort, which we will cover in a minute. Regardless of the work effort spent on tasks, duration is represented or viewed as units of time, such as days and weeks. Those are units of time, not the effort that is spent in doing the work. Those are just units of time. For resources to conduct the work, whether or not it takes them 2 hours or a full day to complete a task. You could say a task should take about 1 day, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be 8 hours. It could be just the duration of the entire activity. And Microsoft Project uses duration to determine the project end date. Just keep that in mind. It uses the duration to determine the project end date. Once you connect dependent tasks with links, that is, when you link tasks, the duration of one task may determine the start of another task, but we haven't done that yet. Since the tasks created in the previous section are not linked yet, you will see that all of the tasks have the same start and finish date, except for the status meetings. But notice here, same start and finish date, all of them have the same information. Then as you learn that upon creating new tasks, Microsoft Project displays one day with a question mark, except again for the status meetings, which is something you learned in the previous sections. All right, so notice automatically displays one day with a question mark. Placing the duration column as the driving field to determine the start and finish date of tasks. And as you learned, the question mark flags that tasks have estimated durations because you have not made any updates to the duration yet. Another thing to remember going forward is that when the first thing you know is that, or your team know, is the duration of tasks. So say, for example, your team members tell you, okay, a particular task is going to take 5 days, right? Averaging it, right? So if that is the first thing you know about tasks, then you should enter the number of days in the duration field. Well, in that case, you are fixing a task with the duration. And we're going to learn later on about types of tasks. Notice by default, Microsoft Project displays fixed units. We're going to change that later on. But a typical recommendation is to, if you know that most of your tasks are going to be based on just a duration and not upon the effort, such as, for example, when you pay contractors or certain individuals by the hour, you may want to have fixed work, right? And you may want to enter the hours on the work column, right? But let me just show you quickly where that comes from. When we go to File Options and we go to, say, Schedule, down here, it says that the default task type is fixed units. And that's what Microsoft gives you, fixed units. Therefore, every task that you create will have this type of fixed units. But we will go over that later on. Now, once you begin assigning resources to tasks, Microsoft Project is going to take care of the calculations, and it's going to calculate the work column in hours based upon the following formula. I'm going to take you to Word very quickly. So this is the formula. It's going to determine the work hours by using this formula, duration times unit. Duration, for example, if you have a duration of 2 days initially when you start entering task estimates, then later you begin adding resources and say you add 3 individuals. The work effort for a task is based upon the duration and the resources and the hours per day. So 2 days times 3 resources times 8 hours per day equal 48 hours. Then each resource would have a standard rate per hour, which would determine the cost of the entire task, right? Based upon the cost per resources, which you will learn later. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about work effort. Work is the amount of effort. Think about effort like sweat. The amount of effort needed for tasks considering an X number of resources in mind. Okay, considering an X number of resources in mind. That means that if you start with work instead of entering duration as an example, right? You gotta keep in mind how many resources you will have for a task to determine the sweat or effort needed for a task. So work is the number of effort hours to complete tasks. And you will use the work column instead of the duration column if the work effort is the first thing you know or your team knows when estimating tasks. It is also important that if you do that, you would use fixed units as the task type. Once you begin assigning resources, Microsoft Project calculates the duration column. So it's the other way around by reversing its standard multiplication formula. So I'm going to take you back to Microsoft Word, right? So it's going to reverse the multiplication by doing division. So in this particular case, Microsoft Project is going to calculate the duration because you started with work, and it's going to do something like this. Duration is equivalent to 48 divided by 3 divided by 8 hours per day. And that should give you a total of 2 days. Let's go back to Microsoft Project here. Okay, so again, Microsoft Project determines the value in the duration column by dividing those 48 hours by the 3 resources and dividing by the 8 hours per day when you start with work. And now we can talk about units. Units represent the number of resource units to do one task and can be represented as decimal or percentages. Units can be people, material, or equipment. Units will be covered in section 7 when you begin assigning resources or the units. In the meantime, think of units as the percentage of units of work to complete tasks. And here are some recommended steps. Either set all task types to fixed duration or fixed work. In this case, I haven't done that. I just left the default in here. And I showed you how to before by going into the File tab, Options, the Schedule tab, and then selecting the default task type as fixed duration or fixed work. So that when you start creating new tasks, they would come with a default of fixed work or fixed duration. But no worries, you can do that later. Then when you're ready to create estimates, like what we're going to be doing in this section, then you're going to enter corresponding estimates for each task. For fixed work task types, you're going to enter the estimated hours in the work field. And then for fixed duration, if that's the first thing you know, then you would select, you would enter the duration, meaning the days on the duration cell. Then for fixed units, you will learn that later on when we turn to section 7 in terms of assigning resources. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're going to turn all of these task types to fixed duration. And to do that, we're going to start with the very first one. And we're going to click on this drop down arrow and change it to fixed duration. Once we do that one, we're going to shift and click on the last one. Then on the right hand side here, under the task tab, you're going to be clicking the fill command and the down arrow. Very similar to Excel. And voila, now you have all of the task types as fixed duration. And notice that because we made multiple changes, everything shows up in color purple. Okay, so I'm going to show you first how to enter durations. To enter estimates, you would enter the number of days, weeks, or months as you learned in the duration column, or enter work effort hours in the work column. For the following example, I'm going to enter 5 days in the duration column, and then I'm going to hit the enter key. But first, I'm going to collapse these status meetings, and I'm going to be referring to this define all requirements here, define all requirements. But before I do that, I'm going to move this particular task above requirements completed. Okay, so as you learned earlier, you just hover here and drag above, and now define all requirements is at the top, and requirements completed, which is a milestone, should be below, just in case, from the last exercise. So here we're going to modify the duration to 5 days. So I'm gonna just type in 5, hit the enter key. And look what happened. Upon entering the enter key, Microsoft Project immediately shows the effect of the change using a light blue background color on the affected tasks. So notice this is the affected task, which is task number 10. But at the same time, because this task is part of the summary task, the parent, notice the parent also got updated. And now notice that the finish date is 5 days after. In addition, you will notice the bar chart has moved from 1 day to 5 days. Okay, so notice the before and the after results of the duration and the finish date columns for this particular task, number 10, and the summary task as well. Well, it is a good time now to save this project or this file. We're going to do File, Save as before. And we are going to call it S3.1.